Good morning again, everybody. Mark's gospel starts with this: the beginning of the good news about Jesus, the Messiah. And then it never mentions the word Messiah again until you hit this middle point, the center point of the gospel. And as the video made quite clear to us, and those, if you read it through the book of Mark, you'll discover that it shows the life of what Jesus did and taught. But at this point, it suddenly changes gear, because he's now going to talk about the very important subject of what it means to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus, and what the impact that should have on our lives. And so chapters 8 through to 10 cover that bit. And so I'm going to follow those bits through, and you'll see that the bit that Barry said about the big secret starts to become clear to everybody. And what was the secret about? As it said right in verse 1, Jesus is the Messiah. But then it keeps quiet the whole way through. And at this point, he addresses the apostles, and he says, so what does everybody think about me? Who do they think I really am? They came up with all funny notions. And then he points the finger at them. And what about you? What's your view? And Peter's the one that came up with this. He said, you are the Messiah. The word Messiah is a title. In Greek, it is the word Christ. In Hebrew, it's Meshiach, which means Messiah. Both mean the anointed one of God, the coming one. And so Jesus warned him not to tell anyone. And in doing so, we read in Matthew's gospel that he says to Peter, hey, you didn't come up with this idea just out of thin air. God revealed it to you. It was a special revelation. You've had it. And this secret about who Jesus really is comes to each individual Christian believer at a moment in their lives when they put their trust in him. And up to them, they haven't got it. And it may be you're here in this service this morning and you still haven't got it. And I hope today you do, or very soon. And so Jesus then, having asked Peter, who do you think I am? You're the Messiah. What did that mean? Well, Peter was referring back to the Old Testament. And Messiah had never been heard of in the Old Testament, and King David came along. And King David was looking around in his fabulous mansion in his palace, and he looked to God and he said, God, you've done wonderful things for me. I've built this wonderful house here in Jerusalem, but hey, you are still living, so-called, in a tabernacle, a tent that's 430 years old and is rotting. Isn't it time I built you a house? And God smiles at David, King David, who, this is the Messiah, the coming one who's got all the armies, and he's fought and brought victory to Israel. And God looks at David and he says this, no, you're not going to build me a house. I'm going to build you a house, a descendant who will be a king. He'll be the King of kings. Your descendant will be the Almighty One, and I will establish his throne forever and ever and ever. And so that is what the Messiah meant. And from King David on, they were all expecting one of his descendants to turn up one day and destroy all the armies that imposed themselves on Israel. But then, having done that, he lets them into a secret. And as the video pointed out, 3 times in these chapters, chapter 8, verse 30, chapter 9, verse 31, and chapter 10, each of those 3 times, he gives the hint to the 12 apostles and the disciples with them that the Son of Man must suffer and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. Well, the disciples knew that already. They knew that the teachers of the law and the chief priests didn't like him, so they expected that. But no. Then he goes on to say this, and that he must be killed. I'm sorry, brother, you've got that wrong. How does the Messiah come with his white horse, his sword in his hand, and destroy everything in sight, stands up against him, and sets up a universal kingdom? How can he get killed? That is stupid. Who came up with that idea? And that after 3 days, he must rise again. What on earth does that mean? And get what? The disciples didn't get it. And Peter, who was foremost amongst them, came back to Jesus, as we saw, and he took Jesus aside, and he began to rebuke Jesus. Lord, you've got it wrong. This can't be true. The Messiah is not expected to do that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. A few minutes before, he said, you are the Messiah. Jesus said, you didn't dream that up. God inspired you to bring this thought. Now he rebukes Jesus, and he says, get behind me. Satan has inspired you with this thought because you have got the wrong idea of the Messiah. You have got your concerns as a human being. You want something physical, a guy on a white horse. It's much more than that, and you have got the wrong perspective. But it's an interesting reaction to hearing the news that Jesus gave. And so he then explains to them what it means to follow him, a disciple. The word disciple, as I remember from my Latin class, is discipulus. And a discipulus was a person who was a pupil in a class. So all you kids who are still here are pupils. You are discipula because you are in a class and you are following what the teacher says. And that is what exactly a disciple is. He's someone who, or she is someone who is a student, someone learning with a big L plate up, and like that diagram here we've got, that's a fail, huh? Sometimes making lots of mistakes. But that's not a silly illustration, because Jesus has just turned their world upside down. That the way we think a Messiah should behave is completely the opposite of how he sees it. And so he goes on to explain what discipleship, following, is all about. And there are 3 things in this passage, 3 stunning things that we need to get into our lives if we want to follow him properly. First thing, a disciple must deny themselves. It's no longer me first. I'm following you, Jesus. You're the king. I want to be a king too. No, no, no. You must deny yourself. You must put your interests second, not just to Christ, but to others. And then the second thing he says, you must take up your cross. What does that mean, to take up your cross? I grew up in Belfast. You'll never have guessed by my accent. And when I was in Belfast in 1972, the Troubles were at their worst. There were riots, bombs, and people getting killed and all sorts of things. And this guy called Arthur Blessed, an American preacher, visited Belfast. He had visited every war-torn country in the world. And he carried a cross with a little stupid wheel on the back end of it, so it wasn't quite the same as carrying a cross. He wheeled it, went all over the world, Cambodia, Vietnam, you name it. He went to every war-torn country and preached the gospel. And you got the impression that this is the American way of carrying your cross. You know, it has to have a motor in it and a little engine. It's not to be a weight upon your back and a burden. But what does it actually mean to carry the cross? When Jesus was condemned, and the Romans did this for everybody, then they were going to crucify him. So from the jail, they put the cross on his back. He had to carry the weight of it and to trudge all the way to the hill where he was to be crucified. And he had to do the carrying. And we know that Jesus stumbled and fell under its weight. And not just that, knowing as you go through the streets, the crowd would spit at you, they'd throw stones, they'd call you names, you criminal, you deserve all you're going to get, you murderer. And they did the same to Jesus. So when you become a Christian, you need to count the cost. You're not necessarily going to be popular. You're going to have people who will call you names and may not do the same things as you saw there, at least if you don't live in North Korea or Iran or somewhere like Pakistan. There are parts of this world where they have to keep it quiet because it is so horrific to gain that horrible persecution. So that is what we do when we become believers. We have to carry the cross. And do you know what the future is for someone carrying the cross? Death. Public death. And there is nothing you can do about it. You become condemned. Now, as we walk the Christian life, we need to take up the cross daily. Be prepared, but continue to witness and bear testimony. And then the third thing that Jesus says is, come, follow me. Follow my example. Follow my teaching. Follow the instructions. Join with other believers and become one with them and give testimony to who I am. That is what being a disciple is. Because look, if you want to save your soul, you'll lose it. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world? Well, nobody can get the whole world because all the other people have got a little share in it. But if you could gain the whole world and you lose your own soul, you've lost out. That is the preciousness of being a believer. Eternal life, glory in heaven, the joy of Jesus' presence with you. That is something that is far more worth than any messiahship or other things that life can throw at you. And then we get to the next chapter, and we come to chapter 9. And as we look into chapter 9, around verse 30 or so, we find this, that Jesus gives another warning to them. And this is after Peter and John and James have experienced that glorious moment on the Mount of Transfiguration. And he starts teaching his disciples after that glorious moment. And he says, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. And then it lets us into the secret. They did not understand what he meant. And guess what? They were afraid to ask him. Many times they'd asked him questions. Jesus, why is this? Why is that? But this time, rise from the dead? What is that all about? They didn't understand. And so he walks on with them, and for a second time, he finds they're arguing. Why are they arguing? He's just explained what discipleship's really about. He's just explained about the cross, that he's going to the cross. They're arguing about who should be number one. Who's the greatest? Peter, are you going to be number one? Can I be number 4 or number 12? You know, and that is what they're arguing about. Again, they don't get it. And so often when we're believers, we get the wrong end of the stick and we think it's about us. And I don't necessarily enjoy many of the Christian hymns today because I find too many are about us and me, and they're not enough about him on the cross. That's just me, I'm old, so you can get away with it. But you can see that we're not in it for what we get out of it. We're in it to be his and for him. And they were saying, who's going to be number one? And again, Jesus did the same act as he had done before. He picked a little child up, put that child in his lap, and he said, look, any of you want to be first? Guess what? You go to the back end of the queue. You must learn to be last. And as believers, we sometimes don't get that. We don't realize we're called to be the last. We're called to give way to others. We're called to put others first. We're called to serve, not to be served. And so he looks at the child, and again, I think this was illustrated last week in a similar story where Jesus said, look, you've got to trust me just like a little baby. Put your full confidence in me, not in yourselves, and that's the way forward. And then it happens again. This time, we're where we are today, within 2 weeks of Easter Day. And 2 weeks of Easter Day, or less than that, Jesus warns them, we're about to go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered into the chief priests and the teachers of the law. We've heard that before, he said. They will condemn him to death. And then he's far more specific at this moment, this third warning, that they will hand him over to the Gentiles. Hadn't mentioned that before. They will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. Very detailed about what was coming. And then 3 days later, he will rise. Very specific. They were within a week. Palm Sunday was the next Sunday that they would be there, which is our next Sunday. And within 2 weeks of his crucifixion, here's how they react. being told that. James and John, we've already heard Peter, came to Jesus and he said, "What do you want?" They said, "Oh, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left." I beg your pardon? Yeah, this is the third time he's explained what's going to happen to him, and they think, well, you're going to go to glory. I want to be up there beside you, one on the right, one on the left. And these are the people who gave us the New Testament. And yet, at this crucial moment, 1 week before the cross, they still didn't get it. Why do you think in the Garden of Gethsemane, all the disciples ran away and left Jesus on his own? Because even then, they didn't get it. And as Mark's gospel points out, as we'll see, next week, Mike will be showing us how he died, the cross, and then Easter day after that, Barry will explain he rose, and they still didn't get it even then at first. But that's what discipleship is about. And so what Jesus then tells them is this: whoever wants to be great must be your servant, your slave. Whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. Can I tell you why you're in this church? You're there, you're here to serve. You're here to be the slave of everyone. Look around you. You are their slave. We're not. Barry's just the minister, but minister means the servant of all. I happen to be the secretary. The secretary carries a few secrets. Yes, that's what it means. But the secretary is there to serve. All of the deacons, elders, everyone is here not for ourselves, for you, that we can hold you up in prayer and in witness and testimony and in growth. That is the point of church. It's about building up. Are you contributing? Are you part of it? Are you committed to it to share and put others first and help where you can? Because that's what Jesus then goes on to say. Now look, here's the third example I'm going to give you. The first example we saw was the story of denying self, taking up the cross. The second example was a little child. Guess who the third example is? It's me, says Jesus, because I'm the Son of Man. I didn't come to be served. I have come to serve and to give my life a ransom for you, for many. Are we here to be served or to serve? That is true discipleship. Amen.